This is the third and final of my lessons that I'm going to be giving today, and this one is going to be a little bit more exploration of the concepts and translation one that I gave earlier today, the first one I gave today. So when I looked at that lesson, something I noted was that all of the concepts I looked at were very cleanly, here's a list of adjectives that apply to an object. But what if we had a larger, more complex concept that we wanted to express? Something we wanted to explain in full to a listener that doesn't really have a singular object we can just explain, right? Like, for example, what if we wanted to describe a basketball game? A basketball game is certainly a musi, at least in the simplest case. And yeah, you could totally start with, let's have a basketball up here. I think this is actually a baseball, but you know, who's counting? So, basketball, definitely musi. There's a sike involved in it. There's two teams. Let's see. The teams are normally of specific colors, or more exactly, their jerseys are specific colors. So, kulupu, la. Let me write correctly. Kule, ante, li, lon. That didn't quite fit. Oh well. Right, and we can go on like this for quite a while. We can go on to describe the rules of a basketball game. We can go on to describe the shape and size of the field. And that's exactly what we're here to do. So, let's have a look at each of these different concepts and a couple more and express them as though we're talking to somebody who doesn't really know what basketball is. Because ultimately, that's the kind of expression you need in Toki Pona to communicate effectively. You need to be able to break down your thinking into these core concepts that express what as though you were teaching it for the first time. So, let's go from there. First off, we have our sike, the cool basketball at the center of the game, and we can describe what happens to it during the course of the game. For example, yan li yo e sike la. And one of the most common things you might want to think about is the course of the game, the goal of the game. And yeah, we can talk about the literal actual goals. If somebody has the ball, ona o pana. Actually, not ona here. Let's use yan. You'll see why in just a moment. Yan o pana e ona. Ona being now the sike. Tawa. Lupa. And as in my first lesson, we're already starting to realize that there's a couple different ways this can branch out, right? We've introduced the lupa, which is, of course, just a hole, but also the closest approximation for the goals at the end of either side of the court. We're also kind of glossing over the fact that there's a specific context in which a person who has the ball actually wants to seek out the goal, right? Because, of course, there's only one goal that a specific team is trying to score on. So, yeah, we can continue exploring the lupa, explaining the purpose of that, how it looks. And so let's do that. We have our person with the ball. They have to give it to the lupa. So we can say, lupa, li, lon, palisa, sewi. Yan o tawa sewi. Tawa pana. So here's one example of how you can further that expression. In this case, we're explaining where the lupa is. And of course, somebody who might be looking at a basketball goal or a basketball court could certainly see what you're referring to, but we will have to go back to that as well. But we have context for where the goal is, and we can say the person must, here we say move upwardly. In this case, you could take it to mean the person has to jump, or it could also refer to the ball, right? So we could more properly tack in a tawasewi e sike. As in, they have to up move it, they have to throw it to properly score. Or you could, again, remove that with my initial thinking of it being, oh, you could also jump to get it up into the goal. Either way, again, we have this web almost of different concepts we can explore in the process of the game. Let's see, let's go to another one. What about the teams themselves? Now, I personally don't actually know quite how many people are on a basketball team. Certainly there's a fair number, but we can say quite easily, Yan mute li lon kulupu. And then, ona li yo e len kule tawa kulupu ona. Gracious, my handwriting. Yeah. So in this case, we express the divisions of the teams. There's many people on each team, and each person on those teams has a colorful cloth, their uniform, which is colored in the context of or for their team, right? And that's just like division of who is on the field. We can talk about what each person might be doing, which of course we did with the goal. But you can see how this process of explaining a concept in Toki Pona, again, expands out toward what all these little details are in a concept. There's no cut and dry way to say, this is basketball, except for in English with the proper noun, this is basketball. But in Toki Pona, of course, we do not have a word basketball or anything similar. But we do have lots of words that can explain all the little parts of basketball. And so I'm going to leave that there and go on to another example. But certainly that is something useful. So my next thought was, what if we wanted to express the idea of a haunted house? Big fan favorite of the Halloween season. Well, in a haunted house, we can start with the expression of the house itself, right? What is it in the first place? Well, obviously, a haunted house is a tomo. Usually, they're colored very darkly. They're pimea. They often have relationships with, they're related to dead things. There's often drawn or placed with dead trees, or even with ghosts, especially ghost stories associated. And that's actually something else. Often your classic haunted house has stories associated with it. Stories could be, say, Toki, especially since these kind of stories tend to be passed down by word of mouth. Let's see. There's usually, in those stories, Yan, and the Yan Moli question mark? Lanpan question mark? There's some kind of backstory to how this house got haunted in the first place. What else? Of course, we have one of the very nice Nimiku Suli to help us along here. And that would be... Monsuta, which is super, super convenient for expressing, yeah, this is a fearful place to be. And everybody on the block and maybe everybody in the city is scared of this place. That's why it's still standing, right? Nobody wants to go there. But all of these concepts and the divisions thereof, they belie the deeper thinking about like the concept of a haunted house. Because all of these things are descriptive of a haunted house, but they don't tell you what happens in a haunted house, right? They don't tell you who lives in a haunted house. They don't tell you the story of a haunted house. They just tell you that there is a story for that haunted house. So let's describe the scenario of walking into a haunted house, right? Let's clear that. So, as I noted in the previous lesson, it's generally best to think carefully about what head noun is most appropriate, but all of those head nouns that I proposed would be, to some degree, explanatory about it. But in this case, we can say, mi tawa insa tomo monsuta. And this is about to be the scariest experience of our lives. So, excuse me. So, mitawa insa tomo monsta. The very first thing that happens, the door closes behind me. Lupa lipini. Here, how about more carefully? Mi insa la lupa lipini lon monsi mi. And then the very next thing. How about you hear a crash from upstairs, like something is in the house and you didn't expect it. Mi kute la mi sona e ni. Yanlilon anu seme. And this can, of course, keep going and going. This is just the very first couple of seconds right inside of our haunted house. We have our loud crash. We have somebody's in the house. We have me absolutely terrified right inside the door. The description of experience in Toki Pona is incredibly exciting because it feels deeper almost than, I think, similar English expressions. Not to say that you couldn't get close with the magic of word painting. You certainly could. But I think the open-endedness of Toki Pona gives a lot to artistic expression. Right, so we just heard our crash. What next? Me looking. Lupa sin li kalama ike sama soeli lili. Here we go. Milukin. Lupasin li kalama ike sama soeli lili. There's another doorway. It slowly creaks open in the same sound as a small creature. And then Mitawa lupa. Tomosin la. Tomosin la, excuse me. Suno wan taso. Lilon ilo moku lon supa. Here is an interesting case, and I really like this one. So let me reread it. Mitawalupa. Tomosinla. Suno wan taso. Lilon. Ilo moku. Suno wan taso lilon. Ilo moku lon supa. Here we've walked into the kitchen. There's a single light shining on a knife, some kind of food tool, on the table. And that's the only context we have right now. And you can see how not only have we built up a scenario where the expression itself is clear, but the breakdown of all these different concepts crashing together in our haunted house, we also have left a lot to the imagination. We have certainly more room to grow, but we don't need to explain every little detail along the way. We can let the listener imagine. There's one spotlight on a knife in the middle of the table. How to get there? Who put it there? Why is there a light in this house? Nobody's lived here for years, right? And then, suno. Let me clear that and start again. My writing is atrocious. Suno li weka li kama sin. Let's see. Ilo li weka. Excuse me. Lipu li lon. Loye li lon ona. Here we go. Suno li weka li kamasin. Ilo li weka. Lipu. Excuse me. Lipu li lon. Excuse me. Dropped an in there. Suno li weka li kamasin. Ilo li weka. Lipu li lon. Loye li lon ona. And then, lilila mi tawa lipu. Mi pilin monsuta. And then we can insert a thought for our character. Lipu li tan seme. This is, I think, one of my favorite parts about expression, right? Because the open-endedness of it gives you a lot of power, a lot of expressive power. In the literal sense, sentences like these in Toki Pona are not all that frightening. Imagining talking about a haunted house in Toki Pona is, I think, not that scary as a concept. But while this does say, yeah, in the context of a little bit, I move to the book. We are here in a haunted house. We have all this context built up to explain how our character feels, where they are, what's gone on so far. And I think we can continue. Actually, would I like to continue? I think, honestly, I've expressed most of my point. No, in honesty, I think I am done at this point. I certainly could continue. The process of traveling into a haunted house, expressing the details of walking along through the haunted house, I could go all Tolkien and explain the creak of the floorboards below me, the dusty cobwebs in the corner, but the more time you spend to establish the context, the more you can rely on your listener. Because, of course, your listener has certainly lived a life. They know what things are in haunted houses, they've heard the stories, they've maybe even seen one for themselves, whether one acted or one that there was stories about on their own block. Which is also something that's incredibly cool about Toki Pona. The fact that you can rely on the experiences of your listener to give you, or to give them context for what you're saying. You can meet them halfway in your expression and in your stories. I'm going to go ahead and call it there. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you learned something interesting.